Hello, everyone. I'm George Nowack, and this is the Creative Corner, a chance for us to put a spotlight on iconic creatives that push content to the next level behind the scenes. Today's guest is the man responsible for this. And joining me today is last year's 2020 Esports Photographer of the Year, Rich Locke. Rich, how are you doing today?
Hey man, thanks for having me. It's really cool to be here.
I have some questions for you, so I can just jump right into the first one. So obviously you winning last year's award for Esports Photographer of the Year, the first thing I wanted to ask was, what exactly did that mean for you?
To be honest, it did mean a lot. I think I was a finalist for 2 years prior. So to win on the third year was great. I honestly didn't expect it either. Third time lucky and all that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say if you were finalist previously, it's not luck at all, right? So it's a cool thing you finally got the payoff, for that hard work. So
totally, it's great. It's really nice. I honestly didn't expect it at all. It's great.
Yeah. So I guess then comparing to this year, or I guess everything that's kind of happened in the past year and a half or so, I wanted to ask you next. So how have you managed to stay active and pretty much sharp with photography with everything that's been going on?
Well, I'm not going to lie, it's been pretty tough. I think the last event I shot was Katowice 2020. And then after that, all work just disappeared overnight. I don't think I'd ever would have expected that at all. During lockdown, we in the UK were under quite heavily lockdown rules, so we couldn't really get out the house, only for kind of certain things. So shooting got put to the side for a bit, although I did try and shoot kind of like my local area in lockdown, and might put it into kind of a book format eventually, whether that happens or not. But yeah, as things started opening up again, I was shooting for local clients. With esports work, I shoot, I'd say 80% esports and about 20% on the side. So it was just kind of going back to the kind of 20% side and just shooting with other clients really. And it was a refreshing change, and it was good to be at home for more than a month. It is what it is, I guess. But yeah, I'm glad to be back on the road again now.
Yeah, obviously that's a great solution to be able to stay in practice. If you can't travel and shoot for these events, then just focus on locally, getting work and just kind of working with what you have, right? So I guess that being said, going back even further, so in terms of inspiration, I wanted to ask you who or what inspired you to pick up a camera, and does anyone still influence your work to this day?
This is a tough question. I think I started taking photos. I had a passion for photography since I was probably about 16. So that was quite a long time ago. I'm not going to give away my age, but it was a long time ago. And I think I was 16 when I think my mum bought me my first DSLR. And then I kept that DSLR for all my kind of life adventures until going full time I think it was about 5 years ago now, maybe less. I don't remember that year, but yeah, so photography's always had a big kind of part in my life. In terms of influential people and people that have influenced my work, I'd say it starts with close friends. I'm fortunate enough to have loads of good photographer friends, which definitely helps. And I think that the world of social media helps as well. I think we're so well connected now with Twitter, Instagram. I think there's just so many I think it's just so easy to find new talent out there and find new influential people. So I don't really have kind of like a set person, and it does change from as I've moved through life. I've kind of had more and more kind of I've kind of had influential people, and then that's kind of and then I've found other more influential people. So yeah, I wouldn't say I have any specific people, but yeah, definitely say it's social media and Twitter, Instagram's definitely helped.
Yeah, honestly, as far as design, it's pretty much exactly the same for me. So I remember for university, one of the first things we had to do was kind of make this list of who's inspired us or like inspired our work. And I think like 4 out of the 5 answers were just like personal buddies from the design community. So it's kind of nice. I think the fact that it is on social media and we can like actually connect with these people as opposed to like famous designers or photographers where you're probably not going to be able to meet them as easily.
Yeah, for real.
Can influence like being able to see that process with your own eyes helps a lot with inspiring you, right?
Yeah.
So I guess that being said, so I obviously have an experience background in design, but when it comes to photography, I'm pretty much completely new to it, and I know that it's a different creative process. So I was hoping you could share and maybe walk me through just a few of the decisions that you make while you're taking photos.
I think the creative process and decisions, I think it varies on the situation really. Depends on events, client expectations. That said, I think I prefer like the full creative freedom of working with teams when I'm on the road with, say, like the TL guys. I think that I much prefer having that creative freedom where I'm solely in charge of what's happening on the road in terms of content there. In terms of processes, I think it's all based on lighting situations. For instance, I'll go to an event or I'll start a shoot and I'll create presets based on those lighting scenarios. Say, for instance, main arena with harsh lights, not always the best light. I'll create a preset based on that kind of lighting in that environment. And then I'll have another preset for, say, outside, backstage, player room, backstage. So I try to create presets totally based on the kind of different lighting in events, and that just helps create kind of like a smooth process throughout and like a consistent color palette throughout my images. I think a lot of what I've taken into esports has originated from shooting outside of esports. I started off my photography journey shooting a lot of work for Monster Energy, and through that I started shooting snowboarding, skiing, snowboarding. So I went to all these various mountains all over the world, worked with events like X Games, and worked with the Oakley snowboard team. And it was a pretty incredible couple of years, and it's the polar opposite of shooting esports. But I think that you can really kind of take away some of the kind of the skills you learn out there. For instance, being under pressure, being in kind of these environments that are kind of pretty crazy at times. And I think that you tend to do a lot of kind of outdoor, natural light, lifestyle work, and I've definitely tried to apply that to esports as such. And I think that's kind of showed in my work, because I do try and get the players outside of the arena and their kind of comfort zones as much as possible. You can really capture the highs and the lows of the emotions outside of the arena, and for me, I think that's what I've taken away from outside esports.
Yeah, I love seeing that connection, because it's the same. I give advice to people who are trying to practice esports design, and I tell them kind of the same thing, is like, look outside of esports, right? Because there's so much more inspiration just outside of what we do, So like you saying, a lot of esports is shot indoors, but through your past experiences, you're able to, take people out of that scenario and kind of create like a new experience for the industry, right? So
yeah,
I guess,
for real.
Yeah, exactly. So like, I guess moving into esports more specifically, so we have kind of like more of an announcement, but so we've decided that the panel for Esports Award, we've decided to delay the Esports Photographer of the Year award, which focuses more on recognizing individual talents and output throughout the year, which obviously there's been much less of. And instead, what we wanted to do was have an option for Esports Photographer of the Year, where people can submit photos that feature esports in some capacity, whether it's a team practicing, competing, behind the scenes stuff, product, event photography. So pretty much everything is open. But with all that being said, I wanted to ask you how important it is to still recognize the photography industry, even in times like these where in-person event activities are a little bit harder to come by.
I think thankfully we're starting to see the end of these difficult times, and we're starting to see some of the events open up again, and that means more photographers attending these events and great images coming from it. I think we've got a little way to go just yet. I know we still have headcount limits at some of these events, but I think that we'll be back to normal soon. Good imagery will be back on our screens. I think there's also a lot of unknown talent in esports that doesn't get kind of shown, and I think it's easy to kind of shadow those people, overshadow those guys when some of the guys big followings, and it's like the players retweet my stuff. I get a lot of visibility on my photos. There are a lot of people creating some amazing photos out there that aren't necessarily well known, and I think they just get a little bit overshadowed with the whole kind of selection process or the Esports Awards, and I think that the photo of the year kind of opens that up a little bit to kind of like, I think one of my favorite photos actually I've got is the team. I think they just lost. I think I don't know what event it was. It's a Counter-Strike team. They sat in McDonald's at like 3 a.m. hating life. Nothing else was open, and it was just like a real nice candid shot of the boys just sat around the table, McDonald's, looking super like depressed. And it's kind of just like, this is the reality of what actually happens here, they don't, these people have got emotions too, and winning, it's not always about winning,
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's part of like, to answer the question, like that's kind of where the importance comes from, is like these photographers, even though these in-person events aren't going on, like they're still putting in the work, practicing, it's still very important, like what they do. And even though they're a little bit more behind the scenes, they're still pushing the industry, just like they were previously, right? Like the industry wouldn't be the same without them, whether or not.
And all these people will be back. These great photographers out there, they'll be back. As soon as these live events start happening, I think we'll be kicking off just as we left.
So obviously last year we had Photographer of the Year for Esports Awards, and what I wanted to ask you next specifically is, having Photograph of the Year, do you think this maybe opens up more options for creativity for photographers, and how do you think people are going to approach this?
I think it definitely pushes photographers to push their creativity a bit more, especially because the category is so stacked in the Photographer of the Year Awards. There's so many great photographers that exist in the space, and I just think to stand out, I think you've just got to be creating something, just look outside the box and create something a little bit different, if possible. I think one of the best esports images I took was in, I think, Bahrain. I think it was Eric, one of the CS coach. I don't know if you guys saw that. I think it was on my portfolio, and that for me, I think the thought process, I almost felt like I deserved the win, based on the thought process that went into that, and it's on Eric's wall in his lounge, the boys have printed it out, and it was amazing. But it's kind of like, do you know what? This is so far away from the kind of the esports side that really, that I've seen before. I deserve this trophy for that, But yeah, I totally get the kind of, the kind of the thought process behind, certain things, certain shots. So it's definitely beneficial to stand out, especially if you're after the Photography of the Year award.
Yeah, I think something that I'm kind of interested in too is the difference between photographer and photograph is focusing on almost more of like a portfolio throughout the year versus a photograph that like represents, like kind of like you said, your most creative endeavor for that year, right? So
yeah,
I'm really looking forward to it. I think it's going to be interesting to see how it goes. Like people are, like you said, are going to need to get more creative for this year specifically. But other than that, that's all the questions I had for you today. But I actually had one more. So it's been a pleasure talking with you, but I also wanted to ask before we end, are you going to be submitting a photo for Esports Photographer of the Year for 2021?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I will be this year, although I haven't got anything just yet. But there's some cool events coming up, so I'll be down to send something over if I can create something that's cool enough.
Cool. I'll be looking forward to it. Otherwise, there you have it. If you think you have Esports Photo of the Year, head on over to esportsawards.com and submit for your chance to be chosen as the Esports Photographer of the Year at this year's main ceremony. Thank you once again, Rich Locke. I've been George Nowack, and this has been your Creative Corner. I'll see you all next time.